Hello Giants fans, welcome to Giants Baseball 101. I'm Gabe Vaughn, your host. We have a question to answer today, so I'm going to dive right into it. It deals with the Giants' starting rotation, and in particular their top two, Logan Webb and Blake Snell, the guys that we expect to really carry it for them through the 2024 season. And the question is essentially, are they better than the Phillies' top two of Nola and Zack? The Giants' top two starters, Logan Webb and Blake Snell, how are they going to compare going into the season? And what are the results going to be? And could they take the Giants to a deep playoff run in a similar way to the way that Wheeler and Nola have really been key for the Phillies, even though they've had a bunch of seasons where they have only been mediocre? They still have managed to make some deep playoff runs for the reason that just that the top end of their pitching is just so good. And in the postseason, you really managed things differently. You were really more or less able to try to win every single game with a little bit less consideration being given to just really a whole bucket of games that you have to play. So how do they compare? Essentially, are Webb and Snell better than this duo that we've seen from the Phillies? Are they roughly comparable, or do they not quite meet that level? And I think the first thing I'll say is that really looking at this, we are heading into some real uncharted territory here. And what I mean by that is essentially that the Phillies, Nola and Zack have really pitched for them for a long time. And for the Giants, they have had Logan Webb for 4 full seasons. But Blake Snell is just coming on now, so and one of Webb's seasons, which was 2020, and I don't think that was a great one for him. It was shortened due to COVID, so even that was not an especially great sample. And so I think this phenomenon, having Webb and Snell pitching together in the rotation, is something that we do have to realize is very new, to say the least. So the question of how good are they going to be in comparison, could they be even better than Nola and Wheeler? And I'm sure we know they could if they're at their best, but I think it should be obvious to us that neither of the two pitchers, Webb or Snell, is infinitely invincible. And they have their weaknesses, and I think that Snell's are a bit more obvious than Webb's. But even Webb, I think it should be obvious that not even he is clearly capable of being perfect all of the time. And he does have his weaknesses, and sometimes it's just not getting offensive support, which is a thing you just have to say would be different in a different environment. So for the Phillies and their top end of the rotation that's just been so dominant, they have had several more years for this to be tested. And until we see something comparable from the Giants, which we in all honesty, we will not, because Snell's on a 2-year contract, and while they could choose to re-sign him after that, they could not. So I guess I don't know, but all I'm really saying is that there's just a lot we haven't seen, and so as of right now, we really don't know what we're talking about. But if the two of them stay healthy, I think it could provide something extremely strong for the Giants. And now, really the second part of the question is, could that take them to a deep October run? And it's an interesting one. what are we to expect out of that? Well, assuming we're looking at a wild card run, and I've said this multiple times, it's probably getting really old, honestly, but I think we just have to realize that just roster to roster, the way the Giants and Dodgers would compare over a 162 game season, it is really, I mean, I don't want to be like things out of the ordinary don't happen, but it is realistically just very hard from an entire National League West perspective. It's very hard to imagine that any scenario where anyone other than the Dodgers wins the division. Again, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to point to the realistic path forward, which is probably looking at getting into the wild card series, which I believe is very realistic for the Giants if Bob Melvin is able to make the team deliver in the critical moments. And yes, that includes one-run games, absolutely. If he's able to make the team deliver in a little bit better of a way than Gabe Kapler did, it's very realistic. Now, going into the postseason, can they get through the wild card series? Well, they will obviously leverage Webb and Snell. I mean, I would assume unless it comes down to the wire in the season, they need one of them to start the final game. But I mean, we can at least hope that they can just leverage their best pitchers in a wild card series, and if the best is really its best, then get them to the division series. But I think the question that's probably on a lot of Giants fans' minds is, will they have to face the Dodgers in the postseason? Unless they're lucky enough that another team can eliminate the Dodgers, that is a very serious possibility. They're going to have to do that. And that's scary. Who wouldn't agree? The Dodgers, remember 2021, that was bad. The Giants lost that one-run game, Game 5 to the Dodgers in the division series. Who is over that yet? I certainly am not. Now, that being the case, would we even have to mention that it would be extremely scary if the two teams had to face off against each other again in this postseason, or really any, in like at least the span of a decade going forward? Absolutely. It would. And yet, if we want the Giants to go all the way and contend, which it's time for them to do, rebuilding was at the end of last decade, and we're probably tired of hearing that term. If the Giants are going to contend, though, they have to prepare for the possibility of facing the Dodgers in the postseason. And Logan Webb, he was one of the guys that this discussion was centered around. He pitched 2 starts against them last time and was very effective. And he said after their final loss that he didn't think it was the only time they'd face the Dodgers in the postseason. The threat there is obvious. Would be extremely embarrassing if they were to lose to the Dodgers again in the postseason, which is a possibility I don't even want to mention. That's why it would be any postseason run for the Giants that also involved the Dodgers would be so creepy, because they have that division enemy in there with them. Very probable that they would have to face the Dodgers at some point. However, it's my only response to that would be, like, I don't know what to say. If we want them to contend, well, it's one of the scary things in life that they're going to have to face. We will be on pins and needles, yes, probably the whole season long, more going into September, and then even more going into October. But we shouldn't just count on another team to finish off the Dodgers for the Giants. They have to have different results this time if they're to go. But whatever postseason opponents the Giants play, they're going to have to be their best. Because if they barely squeeze into the postseason, they can't let that deter them from thinking they can go all the way. Because it's essentially what they did even in 2014. It was a wild card spot that they took. They went all the way, and they won the World Series because they were able to step up and be their best when it absolutely mattered. So that would be exactly what they would have to do in 2024. Logan Webb, as I mentioned, he has a history of postseason success. Blake Snell, too, he pitched against the Dodgers in 2020, and he was the guy the Rays were relying on so much to win the World Series against the Dodgers, and I believe they made a serious mistake in Game 6 in pulling Snell from the game. The interesting thing is that they replaced Snell. Rays manager Kevin Cash replaced Blake Snell because he was coming to the lineup for the third time. He replaced him with Nick Anderson, the closer for the Rays, who had struggled up to that point in the postseason and given up runs in several consecutive relief appearances. That's how they lost the game. Can't know for certain how Snell would have performed facing Mookie Betts and everybody and going through the lineup the third time, but it would have been a better option than putting a tired guy who had been struggling on the mound. It's just that one was ridiculous, but I think the point here that we don't want to miss is Snell's performance and how he was the guy they were relying on, and definitely for good reason. Both of them have some experience pitching in the postseason, and now I think we have a legitimate opportunity to see them do it again. So it definitely could happen. The Giants get to the postseason and these two carry them through. And pitchers are always, they are always expected to work harder than normal in the postseason. I mean, if you have to, what if you do have to use a starter in relief sometimes in the postseason, which that totally depends on how the bullpen's going to be. Ideally, no reason to think starters are better than relievers, like even overall. I don't know why people say that, but it really depends on the quality of your bullpen. The Nationals, you'll remember in 2019, this included their series against the Dodgers, who make the postseason every single year. They won the World Series, but a lot of it involved using their starters in relief because their bullpen was it had been just so bad in a lot of ways, and they really only had two key relievers who could be completely trusted. And I'm not entirely sure how that's going to play out for the Giants. I do think they have some very decent late inning relievers, and that thing's going to be, can they perform in the most critical situations? The point is, I think the Giants are still a very likely team to have to bring their ace or co-ace in relief, like at a time, maybe a critical postseason moment when it is necessary. And the key is going to be to leverage everything, no matter how they do it. So yes, just to answer the question, I think absolutely. And the signing of Blake Snell, which just happened, it has increased the Giants' chances in a very substantial way. And they're just going to have to find a way to play it in the postseason. And I think those guys will be key to it. Thank you for watching. This has been Giants Baseball 101. Please subscribe if you haven't. Also, please leave your questions and comments. You know where to do it. I'll see you next time on Giants Baseball 101.